Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. Aloha! Hey y'all! Happy Sunday! I hear there's a football game going on this afternoon, but that's just a rumor from what I can tell. Man, it's been a week and we're finally winding down. It's and that's a good thing. So, hope everybody is doing well. Today is kind of a mishmash. We'll do a few things, but also I need your questions. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, would like a tool better explained, or you're having problems with something, put it over here in the chat and we'll get to it. I've got something marked already that we're going to get to pretty quick here. But first, I want to give a shout out and say hello to my friend Steve over at Harneal Media, who sponsors my website, marklindsaycnc.com. I sing Steve's praises every Sunday, and I'm going to keep doing it until he tells me to shut up, but only because he's very good at what he does. He's very competitively priced. And he's all about you and what your wants are, what your needs are. He is a small business, home-based business, but that means you get 100% personalized service. When you're dealing with Harneal Media, you're dealing with Steve, not some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere that you'll never contact again. If you're even thinking about looking into a website, maybe a web store where you can offer your products or services to folks without paying these high commission rates or listing fees, or establish a profile that also advertises your competition over on the left side of the page. There's no better way than to contact Harneal Media and get your own website set up. Again, he'll do as much or as little as you want him to do. If you're well versed in running a website, he'll take care of the back end. If you're like me and don't know what the heck you're doing, he can help you with that as well. So do yourself a favor, head over to harnealmedia.com. There's a link to Harneal Media in every video and live stream on this channel, and it's that way for a reason. Thank you very much, Steve. I truly appreciate everything you do, and we'll talk to you a bit later on. Okay. Today is kind of, as I said, a kind of a mismatch of a couple of things. Now, Powell Patterson, how you doing, pal? Had a question. Does the laser module act as a standalone laser design tool like Lightburn? Not really. And here's what I mean. I said I had something marked for later. Powell said earlier, I'd like to add the laser module right now using Lightburn. I would encourage you not to get rid of Lightburn and to stay working with it. And that is mainly because the Vectric laser module is designed for lasers that are mounted on your CNC. Okay. Let me go ahead and bring this up. I've gone over to Vectric's website, and I'm going to come just vectric.com, and I'm going to come over here to products. Then I'm going to come down to the laser module. All right. Now, here on the laser module page, if you scroll down, there's a blank right here. Will the laser module support my laser? Start typing in your machine make in here, and it will let you know if it supports your laser. I believe it only works with lasers that are mounted on CNCs, but I could be wrong. I don't know if it works with standalone lasers. Everybody that I have talked to that has a standalone laser uses light burn. So again, I would encourage you to stay with light burn and look into it. And if you don't get any answers here with will the laser module support my laser, shoot a message over to Vectric through Vectric support, and let's see, contact us. Shoot them a message and um, see if it will work with it. Okay. Powell says the CNC moves much slower than the laser engraver. That is true. That's very true. Where I see the laser module really shining on a CNC mounted laser is when you get into hybrid machining like they show here, a 3D carving and then coming in with the laser and adding highlights and more detail. So hybrid machining is really, really cool. I think that looks great. So I'm again, I would look into it before you make a decision and make that jump, because I'd hate like heck for you. You know, the laser module is only $49. Okay, and the great grand scheme of things, that's not a whole heck of a lot. It but still, I'd hate for you to spend money you don't need to spend. So, you know, it's one of those situations. Let's see. Sam Spade says, I got light burn from my laser. The light burn interface is somewhat similar to VCarve. It's easy to pick up. Yeah, we have a member here, channel member John Thompson, who is quickly becoming. John says, I look a little hazy. Well, that may just be me. It may not be your screen at all, John. But if it looks hazy or something like that, click the little gear below this video panel and then go to you'll see 1080p or 720p or something like that. Click on that and set it to 1080p. Don't set it to auto, set it to 1080p and see if that clears up. But John has become he's an absolute whiz with Lightburn. And what he says he does is he will design in like VCarve or Aspire, then export to a format that can be imported into Lightburn and go from there. But he does some killer work. So a couple of other people, also channel members, Mike Bernasconi is an absolute wizard. Bill Coleman is a wizard himself. He doesn't think he is, but he is. Martin Pearson, who is here with us, is absolutely fantastic as well. And those who can use Lightburn, those whose laser isn't compatible with Lightburn, they use their proprietary software. As far as I know, none of my channel members have the laser module and don't see it as a handicap, mainly because they don't have lasers that are compatible with it. So I would check into it before you spend the money. And I'll just end that there. So let's see here. Yeah, Ray Russell, how you doing, Ray? Said he tried it with his Trotec Speedy 360 and no joy. So, all right. Maurice over at Ericsson Design and Woodworking says, I do the same. Design in Fusion 360 and export to Xtool Creative Space to burn my DXF design for laser marquetry. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and when you stop and think about it, it's just another tool in the arsenal. So being versed in VCarve as well as light burn. You got the best of both worlds. You know, I'm so used to using V-Carve and Aspire for things. My silly logo there, that was designed in V-Carve Pro. And then I took it over into Inkscape and filled it with colors and what have you. But the design was done in V-Carve. So I'm just so used to using it. So yeah, there you go. There's your good resource, Powell. Brooks Martin, another channel member and just all around good egg, says I've used the laser module with my 7-watt JTEC diode. So there's you a resource. So all right, let's see. We did have another question here from Landis Stutz. Says, is it best when doing a 3D carve to do both a rough and final toolpath, or just a final? Okay. That's one of those cases where it's kind of up to you. In many ways, there is no best, but there's a few things to keep in mind. And it's also one of those things that is going to be fluid. It's going to change. Some of it's going to depend on your material, and some of it is going to depend on the bit. Okay. If you have a large project, let's go ahead and put a big star out here. And you know what that means. Always trust your car to the man that wears the star. Ooh, no, didn't quite get it on the first shot. So we'll shrink that down a little bit to get it all on there we go. So it's all on the material. Now, this is a 12 by 12 piece of material here. So we're looking at a star that is, about 11 and some change by 10 and a little bit more than a half, not quite 10 and 5/8. On something big like this that doesn't have a lot of detail in it, and you don't need to use a real tiny bit. You're not going to be using like a tapered ball nose with a 1/16 of an inch tip radius. You can probably get away with a 1/4 inch ball nose here. You may go down to an 1/8 inch ball nose. And with the depth being, with the material being 3/4 of an inch, doing a roughing tool path probably isn't really necessary. But if you're doing something like, let's put something in the middle of that star. Okay, let's go with that. For some goofy reason, you want that in the center of your star. All right. Yeah, well, let's bring that down and kind of center that inside there. In fact, we've got that selected. I'll hold down Shift and select my star. Then I will come down. I'll go to the alignment tools, come down, align to selection. We want to align the selected object to the last item in the selection. I want to put it in the center of my star. There we go. Okay. You may not need a really tiny diameter tool to make the star, but on something like this, which is, come on, what size is it? 3 inches and some change in diameter. Now you are going to need something to get all this detail in this flower here and around these edges. It looks rough because my resolution is way, way, way down. So um, on this, you're going to need a bit with a smaller tip. So then it would be advantageous to go ahead and do a roughing pass and then do a finishing pass. You don't want to, at the end of the day, that tiny tip, that 16th of an inch tapered ball nose, the tip is a 16th of an inch. The bit itself may be pretty robust, but that tip is still pretty fragile, and it would be more likely to break without a roughing pass. The purpose of the 3D roughing toolpath is to machine away the bulk of the material. Oops, we're over here. We're in this, yada, yada, yada. We're in setup. Okay, there we go. Now we're in the roughing. The purpose of the roughing toolpath is to machine away the bulk of the material. And when you do that, you select a machining allowance, in this case, 0.02. That doesn't force the bit to run 0.02 above the actual model. What it does is it limits this roughing tool path. The tool will not get any closer than 0.02 to this actual model. That way, your roughing bit, in this case a 1/4 inch end mill, doesn't actually accidentally get down and clip some of this detail over here while it's roughing everything out. This is here to keep the bit away from this actual model. And then your tapered ball nose will come in and finish it up on a finishing pass. So is it best to use a roughing and then finishing tool path? Depends on the project. Sometimes yes, other times it's not really necessary. So that's going to be determined by the material you're using and the project itself. So and Brooks asked, that centered to the star's bounding box? Yes. It did not center to the star. And what Brooks is referring to is over here, when I centered this within the star, it did not center within the star itself. It centered within the star's bounding box. What that is, if I select it, then select it again, you see these corners out here where I can enlarge or reduce the size of the star. This imaginary box that goes through these whitish diamond-shaped points, that is a bounding box. So if I were to draw guidelines and find the exact center of this star, it would probably be a little bit lower. Whoops, I have the star selected, not the model. Control Z, boom, there we go. There we go. Now I've got that. It would probably be somewhere down in this area. And you would need to measure from these inside corners to the model and then place the center where those intersections were. So just a little thing to watch out for. So, but yes, good eye, Brooks. All right, let's see here. Ed Appleton says, just curious as to why, but was making a round plug for a cutting board inlay. I was clearing the area for cutting the plug out. Was using a 1/4 inch downcut end mill. It went one direction, then the other way. Okay. I may have missed part of his question. Let me zip back up. No, that was it. Okay. I don't really understand understand your question, the situation. You say it went using 1/4 inch down cut end mill. It went one direction, then the other way. I don't understand the issue or the question. Did you mean maybe did you mean instead of going in circles to clear that out? Okay, the cutting went clockwise, then counterclockwise. Okay. Were you using a V-carve toolpath or a pocket toolpath? Let me check the V-carve toolpath here. Yes. For your clearance, you can, and this is just for the clearance tools. You were using a pocket. Okay, let me close this and go into a pocket. All right. If you were using the offset, whether you're going climb or conventional, sometimes that happens in that it also depends on if you've got a profile pass selected. Okay. If you have a profile pass selected, like in raster, it will come along and do a profile pass. When you're doing offset, it's generally going to come in and carve one direction. Then when it comes out to do that final pass, that's when it may change directions. And that's basically, it's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. That's basically to clean up and take away any chatter on that, on the edges of that pocket. Okay. And in fact, you do have in other tool paths, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think it's just the profile tool path where you have yes, when you're doing a separate last pass, you can actually select to reverse the direction of that separate last pass. Okay. Now, sometimes in a pocket, what it will do, and I think this may be where you're going with, especially if it's fairly large. I'm going to move this to another layer. And we'll say new layer, and I'll just call it layer 2, and I'll turn it off. If you're doing a large pocket, and let's align that in the center, zip over here, do a pocket, and I'll use the bowl tray bit. I'm not going to worry about any of this stuff. Calculate. A lot of times what will happen is it will start clearing in one direction until it gets out to a certain point, then it'll suddenly change directions. And that is so that it does this change direction for this final profile out here in a manner that is appropriate for your cut direction, whether you're going climb or conventional. So it'll hollow out most of the material and then get out to a certain point, then change direction. It's kind of like when you're carving the inside of something. Okay, this is hard to talk. It's hard to describe, but real easy to show. When you're using a hand router, for example, you know that when you're clearing away material, you go in one direction, but then when you get to an edge, you have to move that router in a certain direction so you're not climb cutting with a handheld, which is going to throw you up or chip. So what it's doing is it's making life easier on the bit and giving you the best surface possible. And that may mean it reverses direction when it gets to that outer uh, profile, that final cut pass. Like I said, it doesn't make sense, but when you see it in action, it makes perfect sense. Because if you look at the wall finish before it makes that direction change, you'll notice that after it makes that direction change, the quality of the cut is a lot better. It's a lot better. So, yeah, John Thompson says, I've had this happen a lot, but never affected the finish of the carve. Yeah, and in fact, it's done so you get a better finish. So, Pete over at Nature's Live Edge says clockwise then counterclockwise is normal. Yeah. Yeah. So, and it doesn't happen all the time. It just depends on how big the area that you're pocketing out is. So, okay, let's see here. Michael Ludwig is asking, is there a way to ramp on a 3D finishing toolpath? Not currently, no. The 3D finishing toolpath, let me bring this back up, and I'll uncheck that. There is no provision for ramping in the plunge moves. That's because the 3D finishing toolpath is designed to work in conjunction with the 3D roughing toolpath. So the finishing toolpath assumes you have removed the bulk of the material or that your model is up high enough to where it's not going to plunge in super deep. This is another situation where you have to think about what you're doing and you have to think about the model. For instance, if this medallion here is up close to the surface, let me close this and we'll go into material setup. And what I mean by that is the model position in the material. If we look at this from the side, we can see the model is way up here. Now, if I adjust that position down to the center, it just dropped that model position here. Okay. So that is a major factor in this whole thing. I'm trying to remember. So it doesn't need a ramp up here. And to be honest, if it's right up there on the surface, it probably doesn't even need roughing. Now, if it's down in a dish, or this is, again, down in here somewhere, okay, had to recalculate the toolpath. Now it does need a roughing toolpath because it starts about 3/8 of an inch down inside the material. You don't want to plunge your 1/16 of an inch bit down into that because at the end of the day, the tip of that bit is a 1/16 of an inch and you risk breaking the bit. So now is when you do need roughing. But when you rough the model, again, using that machining allowance, the finishing tool path assumes, whether you have or not, that you have hogged away the material, or you don't need to hog away the material, and it's going to just start carving this entire thing. Now, in the case of something, let's get something a little bit different here. Come on. There we go. Let's get a different model, and we'll delete that, go into clip art, and let's go with this. Something that's in a dish. And we'll just do that. That looks good. Now, if we look at our 3D view, that is up close to the surface of the material, but the center of this model is way down deep. All right. So now what you've got to think about is with the other model, doing a finishing toolpath. Okay, let's bring that all the way to the top. There we go. Boom. Yes, go ahead. All right, fine, great. Now with this, on a finishing toolpath, going with offset is going to bring the bit right over to the center, and you see here, it's going to plunge down and start carving this way. That's going pretty deep into the model, or into the material to start carving this model. You may not want it to do that, because again, you risk breakage. But instead, if you go with raster, what's going to happen is the bit's going to start from out here, and it's going to slowly work its way down to the depth of the model. So you're not plunging into the center of the model and cutting through all this material to carve it. You're starting out here and easing your way down into it, so that the side of the bit is removing most of this material, removing most of this material before that tip has a chance to get in there and break. So I know that was a long way to go to get there, but basically put, the short answer is no, currently there's no way to ramp, but knowing which of these strategies to use can basically eliminate the need for a ramp. Now, personally, I'm with you. I think that ramping needs to be addressed. I think I would like the option to ramp in the first plunge, because, as you say, it's that initial plunge into the material that is kind of nerve-wracking. But that's also where a roughing pass can be advantageous, simply because with a roughing pass, most of that material is gone before you ever start. And you don't have to make this machining allowance that small. You can take this down to 50 thou or 30 thou or whatever. I bounce back and forth between 20 and 30 thou. And the smaller this number, the deeper that roughing is going to cut, and the closer to the model it's actually going to start cutting. So, but if that's a feature that you really, really, really want, again, get a hold of Vectric support and ask them for it. Is there a way to ramp in the plunge moves on that initial plunge? So sometimes, if, again, in a situation like this, where the center of the model is the lowest point in the model, I would go for a raster strategy and do it that way, so it'll ease down into this dish. But if the center of the model is the highest point, like let's close this, go back up to the top, back over to the design tab, and I'll get rid of this and go into my clip art. And if this horse is my model, look at the 3D view, his body is the high point of the model. So you wouldn't want to start out here at the deepest part of the carve and work your way that way. You'd want to start up towards the center, and that is when the offset strategy would bring the bit over to the center and then start carving here and slowly work its way down. So it's a balance is what I'm getting at. So now another thing to take into consideration is the fact that even within when you're talking about 3D carves and the 3D finishing toolpath, let's get into my tool database here. This is using my 1/16 of an inch tapered ball nose with a pass depth of 0.1. When it comes to a 3D finishing toolpath, it totally disregards that pass depth because it assumes, and maybe it shouldn't, I agree that it shouldn't, it assumes that you have run the roughing toolpath first. So there's no need to worry about that 0.1. So that was a long way to go to get there. I know that, man. But there's a lot of things to consider when you're talking about that. So Ellen says, I reduce my depth per cut if it feels a little aggressive, more passes and more time, but I don't hear screaming. That works with everything except 3D finishing toolpaths. And I think it's a mistake. However, if it's something that you really think should be added, shoot them a feature request, and that's how I would phrase it. Send an email to Vectric support, and the subject be feature request, and ask them if they can do that. Can you ramp in? Excuse me. Can you ramp in the first plunge move on a 3D carve? That may or may not be difficult for them to do because when you think about it, the z-axis is constantly moving. And if you've done a lot of 3D carves, you'll know that sometimes the bit will be carving along, then it'll lift up and go over to another spot and then carve over here for a little bit. And then it'll lift up and go back over and then start carving a larger area. Well, they may be able to arrange it to where all of those initial plunge moves can be ramped in. I request it, and in fact, I'll get into the beta testers forum and put in a feature request for it as well. So, and you know how it goes. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. So the more of a squeak, you know. So, but to your point, Ellen, if you hear the bit screaming, one of three things is going on. Well, generally speaking, yeah, one of three things is going on. That is the sound of a bit that's struggling. Either your feed rate's too high, your spindle or router RPM is too low, or your depth of cut, your pass depth is too much. And reducing the depth of cut may be just fine. Maybe speeding up the router a little bit is all it needs, but it also depends. There's a balance there too. If you're getting good chips, then maybe just a little bit shallower of a cut. As a general rule, if I don't know the bit, or if this is the first time I've used this kind of material, I have pretty conservative feed rates, and I'll bump up that feed rate on the fly as it's cutting once I see how it's cutting. But if I'm, I cut a lot of maple, so I'm used to cutting maple. So I know about where that sweet spot is, but I'll start on the low end of that sweet spot and then up it if I can until I hear it starting to chatter, then I'll back it down a little bit and let it go. So, okay, let's see here. Jerry Takis is acting. How can you change a smooth node back to a regular node? All right, let's get into some node editing. And we'll zip over here, and we will delete that, and we will delete that. And let's just do some stuff out here. And then tab to close that vector. All right, that's a mess. Okay, so if we come into node editing, and I did that just by pressing the letter N on my keyboard. And I come up to this point right here. I can put my cursor right over that point. You see the crosshairs. The cursor changed to crosshairs. Right click, I can smooth the point. Okay. If you haven't saved the file, you can just Control Z to undo that. Let's Control Y to redo it. I can come up here and just go back to smooth point, click it again, and nothing happens. It's already smooth. I can't do anything about the point, but what I can do is come over here to the line segment and right click to line. Then come over here to this one, right click to line. And that brought back my straight lines. So you can't do it with the point, but you can do you can change the lines. Okay. So hope that helps. Pete over at Nature's Live Edge says, what is the need for a ramp on a 3D finishing toolpath? Does the tapered ball nose not cut on the tip such that a ramp would not be required? No, it's basically what it is to keep from driving that bit 3/8 of an inch down into the material before it starts moving. You're more likely to break a real fragile tip on a bit if you don't ramp it in. It's basically to save the tip of that bit. Let me grab one here, show you what I'm talking about. If I'm using a 1/8 inch, well, I can't find my 1/8 inch now, of course. There it is. All right. There we go. If I'm using my 1/8 inch ball nose, come on, focus. There, well, that's close. If I'm using my 1/8 inch ball nose, that's a pretty robust tip. I'm not really concerned about that. But if I'm using my 1/4 millimeter tapered ball nose, that's a very tiny tip. And if that goes trying to plunge 3/8 of an inch or more down into a piece of material and start moving, I risk breaking the tip off of that bit. And while they're not the most expensive thing in the world, they're not cheap either. So the ability to ramp in might help save that tip. especially if you can control, the angle that it ramps in. So, but personally, if I'm using that real tiny tip on a bit, I'm doing a roughing pass first, no matter what. So it just depends on what you're cutting, how deep it's got to go, and whether or not you've done roughing. But on something like that, I'm doing a roughing pass. So let's see here. Is the thin tip still not at risk after the ramp, or is it the initial movement? It's the initial movement. It's the initial movement. Once it gets going, then you're fine because of that tapered ball nose, the upper edge, um, the upper edge, well, the further up the shank you go, the more material it's going to clear away before that tip has a chance to get there, or be in danger. So it's just that initial plunge. So Maurice at Erickson Design Woodworking said, that's why I like my belt-driven CNC. It'll miss steps before it'll break the tip. Ouch. Uh, Ray Dixon says, where did you get your super small tapered ball nose? Amazon. And in fact, let me get out I'll get it back out. It is a Tool bit. I will go find it and put a link down in the description to it as soon as we get done. It is 1/4 inch shank, 1.25 inch long, and the tip has a radius of 0.25 millimeters. So teeny tiny, teeny tiny. But I'll find a link, and it'll be an affiliate link, because why not? That gives me a little bit of a commission at no extra cost to you. And it's a way to help support the channel. So let's see here. Powell Patterson says, I sell the chips too, animal bedding. That's good if you don't have any walnut in there. Walnut has and all parts of the walnut, the actual meat of the nut, the shell, the husk, the leaves, the wood. All walnut has a chemical in it called juglone, Juglone, and it is toxic to all mammals, as well as a good number of birds. That's why you don't see birds building nests in walnut trees. It's also actually toxic to other plants. If you've been running walnut, you got walnut mixed in that in those chips. Do not, I say again, do not use that for animal bedding. It has killed horses, animals that big. It is very toxic. Look it up on your own. It's Juglone, juglone. Now, having said that, that juglone is not what causes nut allergies. That's not the same thing. I've had people ask me that as well on walnut in cutting boards. What if a person is allergic to nuts? That enzyme or chemical or whatever it is that triggers the anaphylaxis in a nut allergy is not present in the wood. And I had to go through 3 or 4 different sources, FDA, the CDC, WHO, I mean, a whole bunch, and universally it is agreed that walnut in a cutting board is safe for a person with a nut allergy. Walnut oil, on the other hand, is not. That's why I don't use walnut oil on cutting boards. If I'm going to use an oil, it's mineral oil or tung oil, which is my preferred. Let's see. A lot of stuff to consider in this, man. A lot of stuff to consider in this. But yeah, my on the chips, my niece and nephew had chickens, and they loved it when I ran maple because the chickens would go absolutely crazy in that stuff. So mostly cottonwood and maple shavings. We played 2K at a yeah, there you go. You're good. 2,000 board feet at a time. Dude, you're my hero. You must have a good milling operation. Well, you said you were a professional woodworker, so yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh man. Good old days. I'm glad I'm retired though. I couldn't do that anymore. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this. Oh, here we go. Ellen says, so when cutting a straight vector and needs multiple passes, how do I make it cut only one direction, like lift and cut at the same starting point? There are a couple of ways of doing that. Let's see here. Um, trying to think of how the easiest way to explain that. It depends. There's a lot to unpack there, Ellen. Um, it depends on what you're trying to do, cutting on the line. Um, let's get into that tomorrow because I need to check on a few things before I make any declarative statements, okay? So if you don't mind, we can do that for tomorrow on the members only live stream. I'll wait on your response to that. And while I'm waiting on that, Midnight Sun works. Midnight Sun Woodwork says, why can't you use a ramp plunge move? VCarve Pro 12 has it. Yes, VCarve Pro does let you ramp a plunge move, but not in a 3D toolpath, a 3D finishing toolpath. That's the thing. So, Ed Appleton asked, was going to use pure tongue oil on a cutting board. Directions suggest the first coat to dilute with white spirit. What is white spirit? If it's going on a cutting board, do not use white spirit. Um, and again, I have no affiliation with these people. I will put an Amazon affiliate link in the description. What you want is a food grade solvent for thinning tongue oil if you're going on anything food grade. Okay. This is what I use Nature's Orange. And brother, it smells like you're in an orange orchard when you use this stuff. It smells great, but boy, is it strong. Um, yeah, you need to find a food safe solvent to thin the tongue oil. Now, I I use this mainly because it's readily available here. There are other brands, but it's a citrus based solvent. Couldn't think of the word. And when I did my cutting board, which is getting close to being put into service as soon as I can put a brisket on the smoker. I ended up with 6 coats of tongue oil, and the first coat was thinned probably 25%. So 3 parts, or yeah, 3 parts tongue oil, 1 part citrus solvent. But white spirit, I want to say white spirit is what we call. I always get this confused because there's white spirit and there's methylated spirit. I believe methylated spirit is what we call denatured alcohol, and white spirit is like mineral spirits or paint thinner. I believe. I can't remember, basically. Let's see here. Donald Harding says, I have a lot of sawdust that people want, but I had to guarantee that there would be no black walnut chips. I couldn't guarantee that, so they don't take my chips. Yeah. And, you can't blame them. Mark, can you answer the single direction passes question and then live next week also? Yes, I will. It's basically, I don't want to make a declarative statement now because I need to check on a couple of things, but there are a couple of ways of doing it. Just depends on what you're trying to do. So, let's see here. Looks like that's about it. Okay. Wikipedia says white spirit, Australia and the UK and Ireland, or mineral spirits in the US and Canada. Okay. Also known as mineral turpentine, Australia, New Zealand, and ZA. I'm not sure what that is. Turpentine substitute and petroleum spirits is a petroleum derivative, clear liquid used as a common organic solvent in painting. Yes. So mineral spirits. All right. White spirit is mineral spirit. Okay. All right. And it's funny, we had this discussion the other day. I was out in the chat of another friend's live stream. Okay. ZA is South Africa. Okay. All right. And I don't remember who it was that was saying that they can't get turpentine. Turpentine is no longer available. And it's been banned. And I'm like, really? Can y'all buy turpentine? I mean, I don't use it very often, but I've got a gallon of it here in my, my paint locker. So that's my question to you. Can you still get turpentine? We don't have any such restrictions. I can buy naphtha, I can buy turpentine, I can buy lacquer thinner. I mean, I find all kinds of stuff. So Funweo says, what projects are you working on right now? I'm working on other things, as you can see. That's the world's most expensive assembly table right at the moment. More on them soon. As we wind down, I've also got to make some more cutting boards because I got so much I got a bunch of end grain scrap, and I got so much scrap is starting to take over the shop. A programming note on Sunday, March the 2nd, I will be out of town, so there will not be a live Q&A. So that is 3 weeks from today, there will be no members only live stream. I will, however, be back in time to do the members only live stream. That will go off as planned, regularly scheduled. Good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. So, speaking of members only live streams, gotta remind you, and I did it right this time, members, check the community tab, and it's there this time, I promise. Bob Heltebridal has kept me honest for the last 2 weeks in a row, where I was late in posting the link to the Monday members only live stream. We're going to work on that cutting, lift out, cut, lift out, cut. We're going to work on that a little bit, and we're going to do a few other things. I've got some member pictures of a couple of different framing methods that folks have contributed after Mike's discussion of his framing method, his floating frame. And we'll do a few other things. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or if you'd like to get information on how to become a channel member, take part in these members only live streams, be part of the super secret private Facebook group and our private chat, which can get pretty busy at times, as a matter of fact. Right down below this video panel, you'll see the join button. Click on that join button, and you're not joining anything, but a panel's going to pop up and a video is going to play to tell you all about channel membership. So we would love to have you aboard. We've got a great crowd, and we just generally have a good time and give it a real good go. So that's tomorrow, channel members. And yes, the link is posted over on my community tab here on YouTube. Another programming note I was going to do, and I was halfway through getting ready to do a video on toolpath templates. And that has been put on hold because the two reasons for using toolpath templates I was going to demonstrate, those two situations will be it'll be basically obsolete when version 12.5 comes out. So I have decided to put that on the back burner until version 12.5 is released. And once 12.5 is released and I've got everything all set and ready, maybe I'll come back and talk about toolpath templates. But basically, version 12.5 is going to remove the reasons I use toolpath templates. So what the heck? All righty, we'll go ahead and we'll end this. I don't know what I'm going to do yet next week. We'll come up with something. Channel members, see you tomorrow evening. For everybody else, y'all take care. Thank you for spending part of Super Bowl Sunday with me. Yay, sports ball. Go team, go. And let's be safe out there. Everybody make it home after the game in one piece. Y'all take care. Have a great day. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday with me.